Hello everyone. Welcome to Learn English with Stories. Today's story is called The Day I Lost Myself. Listening to stories is one of the best ways to improve your English naturally. So, don't worry if you don't understand every word. Just relax, enjoy the story, and your English will improve little by little. Now, let's begin. There was a time when I knew exactly who I was. I had dreams. I had hobbies. I laughed easily. I enjoyed the little things in life. I loved reading books on quiet evenings. I enjoyed long walks without looking at my phone. I always believed that life was about enjoying the journey, not just reaching the destination. But somehow, that person slowly disappeared. It didn't happen in one day. It didn't happen in 1 month. It happened so slowly that I didn't even notice it. Every morning, I woke up with a long list of things to do. There was always someone who needed my time, someone who needed my help, someone who expected something from me. Whenever someone asked me for a favor, I always said yes, even when I was tired, even when I didn't have enough time, even when I wanted to say no. I was afraid of disappointing people. I thought saying yes would make everyone happy. But I never stopped to ask myself one simple question. Am I happy? Days turned into weeks. Weeks turned into months. Without realizing it, I stopped doing the things I loved. The books on my shelf slowly collected dust. My walking shoes stayed in the corner of my room. The guitar I used to play every weekend remained inside its case. One evening, I noticed something strange. I couldn't remember the last time I had done something just for myself. That thought stayed in my mind. But instead of changing, I told myself I would think about it later. Later became another week. Then another month. Life continued moving faster and faster. One Saturday afternoon, I was cleaning a drawer when I found an old photograph. It was taken several years earlier. In the picture, I was smiling, not because someone had asked me to smile. It was a real smile, the kind of smile that comes from feeling truly happy. I looked at that photograph for a long time. Then I looked at myself in the mirror. For the first time, I noticed something. The smile I saw in the photograph was missing. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I simply looked tired, not just physically, but emotionally. I quietly sat on the floor with the photograph in my hands. One question kept repeating in my mind. When did I change? I tried to remember. Was it last year? Was it 2 years ago? I couldn't find the answer. Then I found an old notebook beside the photograph. It wasn't a diary. It was a list I had written many years before. It was called Things That Make Me Happy. I smiled as I read the list. Reading books, watching the sunrise, learning something new, calling old friends, playing the guitar, spending time with my family, traveling to new places. They were all simple things. None of them required a lot of money. None of them were impossible. So why had I stopped doing them? I closed the notebook and sat quietly. For the first time in years, I realized I hadn't lost my dreams. I hadn't lost my abilities. I had simply lost myself. That night, before going to bed, I made one small promise. The next morning, I would do one thing, just for me. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. For a few moments, I stayed in bed, looking at the ceiling. I remembered the promise I had made to myself the night before. It wasn't a big promise. I wasn't trying to change my whole life in one day. I simply wanted to do one thing that made me happy. Just one thing. I got out of bed, made myself a cup of coffee, and picked up one of the books that had been sitting on my shelf for years. The cover was slightly dusty. When I opened it, I found an old bookmark between the pages. I smiled. I couldn't even remember the last time I had read a book without checking my phone every few minutes. I sat by the window and started reading. At first, it felt strange. My mind kept wandering. I wanted to check my messages. I wondered if someone had called me. I thought about the work I still needed to finish. But I gently brought my attention back to the book. 30 minutes passed without me noticing. When I finally closed the book, I felt calm. It wasn't because the story was amazing. It was because, for those 30 minutes, I had given my mind a chance to rest. That afternoon, I decided to go for a walk. I left my headphones at home. I didn't want music. I didn't want a podcast. I just wanted to hear the world around me. As I walked through a nearby park, I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to in a long time. Children were laughing on the playground. An elderly couple was feeding birds. A young father was teaching his daughter how to ride a bicycle. The wind moved gently through the trees. The sound of leaves rustling made everything feel peaceful. It reminded me that life isn't always as rushed as we make it. Sometimes, slowing down helps us see what we've been missing. When I returned home, I felt lighter, not because my problems had disappeared, but because my mind wasn't carrying quite as much weight. Over the next few days, I continued making time for myself. Some days, I read for 20 minutes. Other days, I went for a walk after dinner. I even cleaned my guitar and played a few simple songs. At first, my fingers felt stiff. I forgot a few chords. I laughed at my mistakes. It didn't matter. I wasn't trying to impress anyone. I was simply enjoying something I had once loved. A week later, I called an old friend. We hadn't spoken in almost 3 years. I wasn't sure if the conversation would feel awkward, but as soon as we started talking, it felt as though no time had passed. We laughed about old memories. We talked about how life had changed. Before ending the call, my friend said something that stayed with me. "I've missed the old you." I didn't know how to respond. Those words echoed in my mind long after the call ended. Had I really changed that much? That evening, I stood in front of the mirror again. This time, I noticed something different. I still looked tired. But there was a small smile on my face. A real smile. Not a perfect one. Not a big one. Just enough to remind me that the person I used to be was still there. I hadn't disappeared. I had simply been buried beneath stress, responsibilities, and endless worries. The following weekend, I decided to spend an entire afternoon away from my phone. I switched it off and left it in a drawer. At first, I kept thinking about it. I wondered if I was missing an important message. I wondered if someone was trying to call me. But after an hour, something surprising happened. I stopped thinking about my phone completely. Instead, I enjoyed the quiet. I wrote a few pages in my notebook. I watched the sunset from my balcony. I even cooked my favorite meal without rushing. That night, I slept better than I had in months. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. There were a few missed calls, some messages, nothing urgent, nothing that couldn't wait. That was the moment I realized something. For years, I had believed the world couldn't move without me. But the truth was, life continued just fine. I was the one who had been running too fast. I was the one who had forgotten to slow down. A few days later, as I was organizing my bookshelf, a small piece of paper slipped out from one of my old books. I picked it up. It was something I had written to myself many years earlier. As I began reading those words, I felt tears fill my eyes, because I had completely forgotten the promise I had made to myself all those years ago. I slowly unfolded the piece of paper. The handwriting was mine. It was a note I had written to myself many years ago. At the top of the page, I had written, "To my future self." I smiled without realizing it. Then I started reading. "I hope you still laugh often. I hope you still make time for the people you love. I hope you never stop learning. And most of all, I hope you never become so busy that you forget to enjoy your own life." I stopped reading. Those words felt as if they had been written by a different person. The younger version of me had no idea what life would become. But somehow, that younger version understood something I had forgotten. I folded the paper carefully and placed it on the table. For the rest of the evening, I thought about those simple sentences. I realized I had spent years trying to meet everyone's expectations. I wanted to be helpful. I wanted to be responsible. I wanted people to think well of me. There was nothing wrong with those things. But somewhere along the way, I forgot to care for myself. I forgot that I mattered too. The next morning, I made another small decision. I bought a new notebook. On the first page, I wrote, "Things that matter." It wasn't a list of goals. It wasn't a list of achievements. It was a list of things I never wanted to forget again. Spend time with family. Read every week. Take walks without rushing. Call old friends. Learn something new. Take care of my health. Make time to rest. Smile more. Say no when I need to. Say yes to the things that truly make me happy. Every Sunday evening, I opened that notebook. I didn't ask myself, "How much money did I earn?" I didn't ask, "How many tasks did I finish?" Instead, I asked, "Did I make time for the life I actually want to live?" Some weeks the answer was yes. Some weeks the answer was no. But instead of feeling guilty, I simply reminded myself to begin again. Slowly, my life started to feel different. Not because everything became perfect. I still had responsibilities. I still had stressful days. I still made mistakes. The difference was that I no longer ignored myself. I learned that taking care of myself wasn't wasting time. It was giving myself the strength to face everything else. Months passed. One afternoon, I looked at the same photograph I had found that day. Then I stood in front of the mirror once again. This time, I noticed something that had been missing for a very long time. The smile had returned. Not because life was easy, not because every problem had disappeared, but because I finally felt like myself again. Looking back now, I understand something I wish I had learned much earlier. You don't lose yourself all at once. It happens little by little. One busy day becomes another. One forgotten hobby becomes another. One missed conversation becomes another. Until one day, you wake up and wonder where the old you went. The good news is this: you can always find yourself again. Not through one big decision, not through one perfect day, but through small choices. Reading one chapter of a book, taking one quiet walk, calling one old friend, watching one beautiful sunset, saying no when you're exhausted, saying yes to something that brings you peace. Those small moments slowly bring you back to yourself. Life taught me something very important. Success is wonderful. Working hard is important. Helping others is meaningful. But none of those things should come at the cost of losing who you are. Don't wait until you're completely exhausted to slow down. Don't wait until you've forgotten your own happiness. Take care of yourself today, because the relationship you have with yourself is the longest relationship you'll ever have. If you're listening to this story and you've been feeling tired, overwhelmed, or as if you've forgotten who you really are, I want you to remember this: it's never too late. You haven't lost yourself forever. You've simply been giving too much of yourself away. Start with one small step today. Read a book. Go for a walk. Talk to someone you love. Spend a few quiet minutes without your phone. Little by little, you'll begin to recognize yourself again. And one day, you'll look in the mirror and smile, not because your life is perfect, but because you finally come home to yourself. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. I hope you enjoyed it and learned some useful English along the way. If this story touched your heart or helped you improve your English, please like this video and share it with your family and friends. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more real-life English stories that help you improve your listening, vocabulary, and speaking naturally. Now I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever felt like you lost yourself? What helped you find yourself again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Your story might encourage someone else. Thank you for listening. Take care. Keep practicing your English, and I'll see you in the next story.